it's one of those practices. Like health isn't something that's an on and off switch. It's something that we're constantly working and molding, and healing is an active verb. It's not like a one and done situation.
Welcome to the Mindful Method podcast, where we don't just fill your ears, we fill your mind with the tools to enhance your emotional and physical reality. I'm your host, Jordana Sade, here to guide you on this journey of the body-brain connection and help you take your power back to create the life you've always wanted. So grab a seat, because class is in session and our method is on the syllabus. Here at the Mindful Clinic, we're not just changing your mind, we're changing your life. One mindful moment at a time. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Mindful Method podcast. Today, I have a very special guest. Her name is Miriam Jacobson, and she too has a very similar story with, she's a dietitian. She has 15 years of experience, so she has that nutritional background, but also then diving into a little bit more of the emotional mind-body connection, food freedom, journey. So welcome, Miriam. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to chat with you today and cover a lot of different things that we both have in common and to learn about each other.
Yeah. Okay, so why don't we start like right from the beginning, the only place to start. And if you can just tell me a little bit about your story and like what brought you to where you are today.
Oh gosh, yeah, there's so much background here, but my healing journey really started when I was younger, when I was 13 years old, and I had just a major rupture in my life. My dad was actually killed on September 11th.
Oh.
And so this major loss just rocked my world. And about 3 weeks later, my mom actually was diagnosed with breast cancer. So my entire world, outer inner worlds, just like came crumbling down. And I am someone who presents to the world as okay. Like I'm really good at faking it. And so everyone's like, oh my God, you're doing amazing, like considering what's going on. And meanwhile, I was really suffering so much inside. And at that time, all of my health issues really started because I was emotionally numbing so much. And so I started getting migraines when I was 13 years old, chronic pain at 13. I was emotionally eating like everything in sight just to self-soothe because I didn't really have any other tools. And, I think that with the healing process, we can't really start until we're ready to, when we're really in a sense of safety or have a sense of safety. And so that didn't happen for me until I was 18 years old, until I left New York. And then all of a sudden I realized how not okay I actually was and how I spent the last, 5 years of my life really gritting through. And so at that point, I started working with a therapist, and she helped me start peeling back those layers of health and healing. And that's really what started me on my health journey. And then during that time, I discovered nutrition and how fascinating it was, and how much of an impact it made on your body's physiology and how you feel in the world and showing up. And so from there on out, I really, took this mind body approach where I was like, okay, I need to work on my mental health, but also food plays a really key impact in this as well. So
Wow.
I, became a dietitian. And then like, as I started learning more and more about it, I ended up becoming a functional medicine dietitian because I wanted to really make an impact in how people felt from the inside out.
Yeah, wow, that's a really powerful story. I'm so sorry that happened to you. I was not expecting that. I was like, "Whoa." Totally caught me off guard. And I mean, obviously at 13, like what 13 is equipped to deal with something like that? Like even if you have like the most perfect, even if your parents are psychologists, like it's not
Mhm.
something that most young children are able to go through or see being modeled, especially when it comes to something like death. Okay, so you mentioned that you became a dietitian, super
Mhm.
cool, and then you kind of transferred into a functional medicine dietitian. So can you tell me like what the difference between those two things are, and like what's like why, like what does functional medicine mean for you?
Absolutely. So in short, I'll start with what functional medicine is. It's really getting to the root cause of someone's health imbalances. And so it's really looking at the underlying contributors to why we're in pain, or why we're bloated, why we have anxiety, right? And so a lot of this can be obviously food related, which is why I practice nutrition. And, when for me in my own personal journey, when I was in my early 20s, my health issues still hadn't resolved, right? I was still in chronic pain. I wasn't being able to sleep at night. And that journey, I discovered functional medicine because I was really at the end of my process around discovering it through mainstream medicine. I went to my doctor and he was like, "Oh, you have hormone issues, you're a woman, like what do doctors say?" And I was like beating my head against a wall trying to figure out what was wrong with me. And at the time I was working with a functional medicine nutritionist. I was her assistant. And so that's really before I think functional medicine went mainstream. That's really when I discovered it. But since then, it's an application that can impact so many people. So I was like, oh, I found the power of that inside of my own body. And then since then, I'm like, oh, we can use functional medicine to really help someone going through hormone imbalances or through endometriosis, and it really looks at what foods are creating inflammation in our body, how our body is digesting and absorbing those nutrients, what's happening with our body's chemistry, whether that's our brain chemistry or neurobiology or our hormones, our adrenal health, right? And so it can also be what's happening with our nervous system, what's happening with our spiritual health, our outlook on the world. All of those things can make a really powerful impact in our lived experience and how we're showing up. And so I think that it's one of the most powerful methodologies because there's no one size fits all way of working with everyone, right? Like what I need is really different than what you need. And even when I have two patients sitting in front of me, right, like back to back, and they both have endometriosis, the plans are actually entirely different because what they're experiencing and what they need are very different. What's showing up on their test results are different, even though those like end goals might look the same. They're rarely the same path to getting there. And I think that's really the power of functional medicine.
Yeah. Yeah, I love the way that you explain that. I'm very similar to you. Like I became a nutritionist and then I became a functional medicine nutritionist. And then from there I was like, okay, the way that I was trained, I'm in Canada. So the way I was trained is like it really is that, of course, root cause approach. Like we're looking at like the imbalances in the body, the chemistry, all those things. And then so, at that point I was able to help like 70% of people with just nutrition alone. It was like 30%, if I'm going to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was like, and you can help 70%. And then at that point, I went and learned more. Then I went to do a master's and PhD in psychology. And that was kind of the missing puzzle piece, but there's still that like 10%. And that 10% is like where that spirituality, that soul, like, all of that stuff comes in. So I love just in the way that you described functional medicine, you already included that like spiritual self, that like it is just so it's such a holistic, like truly holistic approach. And everybody's different, but the symptoms can look very similar in the body. So yeah, that was a perfect description. Okay, so in your practice now, like what would you say are some of the things that you see most commonly with women?
Well, oh gosh, with women, I think especially we're under eating. I think a lot of women are not fueling themselves properly. I think a lot of women, especially like women who are not necessarily overweight and aren't underweight, but kind of like in that middle area, there's a lot of body dysmorphia that I'm seeing. And a lot of people pick at themselves and they're like, oh, like this roll of fat, or, this jiggle here, like it's not the way it used to be. And even though I think, that the body does speak to us and our bodies do change over the course of our lifetimes. And so what we're experiencing in our late 30s and early 40s is different. I think that there is just such a focus on body aesthetics, and that causes people to over exercise and overexert themselves and under fuel. And I think that is really what is keeping so many women sick. And I think it's keeping so many women in adrenal fatigue. And because it stresses your body out, right? When you're pushing, and you're not fueling yourselves properly.
Yeah.
And that deteriorates all systems. So I see that as across the board, something that impacts so many women that I work with.
Yeah. I also see that all the time. There's like different archetypes of people that I will like come to me, but there's always that. And it's exactly like you described. It's like they're not underweight and they're not like obese, but they're in this like, and you know, they're doing everything right. They're going to the gym every day. They're like eating like 1,200 calories or whatever it is. And it's just like, actually, that's the thing that's stopping you. And but there is so much fear around, if I eat more, I'm gonna gain weight. And so like I'm just picking your brain here too.
Mm-hmm.
But typically when somebody comes to me like that, like obviously we need to get them to eat more, but what would you say in your practice, even, or to the people listening to this, like when they're increasing their caloric intake, like what type of effect does that have on the body immediately and then long term?
Yeah, well, I think that I really get people to focus more on the quality of what they're eating rather than the calories. I think calories inherently creates so much fear among people, whether it's like too little or too much. And so it's like, okay, let's step away from those calories and really get into this felt sense of embodiment. Like, how does your body feel? Right.
Mm,
And really connecting deeply on that level. Because most of us need to be eating more, right? But we need to be able to slow down and really listen. And when we do that, you actually end up being able to build more lean body mass in the long term, right? You're able to perform better and show up better. Your hormones begin to sync, your cycles begin to be regulated, right? And so those are things that you can expect. But I think in the short term, it can be really challenging because you're fighting all of these external messages around what we should be doing. And who do you think's feeding that to us? Like influencers and diet culture, and it's like, oh, look at me. Like I have 6-pack abs, and this is what I'm eating. Right. But it's like, okay, you don't really know what's happening behind the scenes of that
mm,
person's life,
mm,
and when we can really connect inward with how we feel on a physical level, on like an emotional level, from our nervous system standpoint, we're actually able to uplift ourselves physically and then also professionally. Our lives expand, right? When we have the energy to be able to do that, our relationships begin to shift as well, and we find more joy in our lives. And so I think it can be really uncomfortable at first to kind of go against what this like multi-trillion-dollar industry is kind of putting down our throats, because it's based in fear, right?
mm,
And it's uncomfortable because you're beginning to shift and you're going against the grain and you're beginning to live outside of the box that this wellness industry has really set up for us, right? And they've set it up for us because it's profitable for them. They're making so much money off of our own insecurities. And so it's going to be uncomfortable to live in a different way and choose a different path, but that path can lead you to so much healing and so much connection with yourself. And it really expands again out into other areas of your lives, into your relationships, into your work.
mm. Great answer. I find this all the time too, where it's just like I find that it's so hard to I'm going to use the word convince, but I'm not ever trying to convince my clients. The conversation that has to happen is it's like there's, because of that fear, they're so afraid to whether it's like eat more or like stop dieting or stop feeding into this like fear mongering, the diet culture, etc., because they're so afraid that they're going to get worse, they're going to be out of control, they're going to gain all this weight. And it's just like, actually, like what we're doing here is when we bring you back, like you mentioned, like the word embodiment, that and like and really that's like developing that level of self-trust. Like once you have that, like you like you can trust that you're not ever going to like put like self-sabotage yourself. You can trust that you know what I mean. But I find the hardest conversation is actually getting people to like buy into trusting themselves rather than trusting someone outside of them that's like literally making money off of their like downfalls.
Yeah, we're literally taught to like outsource our own health and our own well-being. And it's really where the best people to really connect in with our own experience, right? Because my life is going to look entirely different than yours. And that's okay. And that's actually a beautiful thing. Like it would be really boring if our lives were super cookie cutter. And they change and develop over time. And so this is maybe where you're starting at, and you don't know where it's going to lead you to, which is scary, but it's also so exciting.
Okay, so maybe you don't have an answer for this, but that's okay.
Yeah.
But like I'll pick your brain a bit again. What are some ways that you help women kind of develop this level of self-trust or like go into that embodiment? What are some tips you can give my audience?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And I think it's really different for everyone because we all start in different places. And I think when it comes to health and healing, I think about it in layers almost like what's that most accessible place to start
Mm,
from? Right. And um, for me, I think about a lot about like meditation, and like, I don't like doing a meditation practice. It's so hard for me. I'm a very active person, and it's really hard for me to quiet my monkey mind. But for me, the slowing down, what really helps is connecting to my breath.
mm,
And when I feel like I'm like, I don't know which direction to go, I really try, and this is for myself and then also for my clients, right? Where when we can connect with our breath, we actually slow down our nervous system into this rest and digest state. And so it helps you better inform that next step forward. But
mm,
slowing down your inhales and slowing down your exhales, it sounds so simple, but to me, it's one of the most accessible things that we can reach for because it's always there for us.
mm,
And then it
mm.
can help you then drop in so that you can then have your next step forward and be more informed around what foot you're putting forward next.
Okay, so do you work with people that have chronic pain now?
Yes. Yeah. So the really interesting thing I think about the medical world and the Western medical world and working as a functional medicine dietitian, right, is that there's so many different like labels for all the things that can be wrong with us. And there's so many different diagnoses. At the end of the day, like I'm looking for other issues, right? And so people with chronic pain, um, they can have scleroderma, they can have an autoimmune disease, that they could have arthritis, they could have endometriosis, right? But at the end of the day, it's really looking at like inflammation and what's causing a lot of this inflammation, what's causing pain, um, and that pain perception. And so it's really interesting to take that food-based approach of like reducing inflammation, the nutrient-based approach about looking at what antioxidants are they low in, what toxic exposure do they have, and then also what is their mindset, what's their outlook, are they expressing gratitude, are they living in the present, because all of those things really do contribute to our level of experienced pain in the body. And so again, your doctor might call it X, Y, and Z, but really at the end of the day, that functional medicine approach is really digging that layer deeper and looking at why, which is why I love working with people with pain, because it is something that can shift in a dramatic way. Again, we might not get you to 100% recovery, but if we can get you to 50%, if we can get you to 70% feeling better, it is so worth it.
I had like a major health crisis in like 2018 and I developed like chronic pain. And my doctor was like, you're just depressed, like take some SSRIs. And I'm not knocking Western medicine. Like, honestly, thank God for my doctor. If I need a pap smear, like, please tell me if I have AIDS or not. You know what I mean? Like, it's like I'm not going to like go to a functional medicine doctor for like if I need heart surgery or like whatever it is. But there are just some times where it misses the ball. And I think that because so much of the way that the body speaks to you is through the only way it can speak to you is through symptoms, right? Like the body, I mean, unless you have that like really, really strong sense in yourself and you can hear your intuition, which I personally am even still developing. But for so many people that have like dealt with health issues for so long and that they've been so disconnected from their bodies, it's not their fault. It's the place we live in. The only way that the body can be like something's wrong is like through these signals, right? Um, but so the interesting thing with the pain is that for me it felt like I was having a heart attack. Like I was like, I'm dying. Like just take me to the hospital like every day.
but like it, because there was so much pain here. And I'm pointing to my chest if you're listening to this and not watching it. But anyways, when I learned, so I'm already a functional medicine nutritionist at this point. I'm doing all the things. I'm taking all the like anti-inflammatories, whatever, and it's just not going away. And I had this like aha moment where I was like, wait a second. If I was actually dying, I would have died already because I felt this pain before. And then like, so then every time I kept coming up, I would just be like, I'm just going to let that go for now. And like, and then I'll come back to that later. And I did that like 2 or 3 times. And I swear to God, I kid you not, the pain just went away. Like, and it's just, in that moment, it just clicked to me that I was like, oh my gosh, this is such a mind thing. Like, this is like my
Hmm.
perception of like what's happening. Like, the signal's there, but if I pay attention to it and then I give it more energy, and then it's all of a sudden I'm going to die and I need to go to the hospital, that it just like, it feeds that fire. Right. And so I do really, like believe and love the power of just even our thought processes and like everything that goes into the way that the mind and the body, communicate, because it's a really unique experience.
Absolutely. And I just want to rip on that for a moment because that resonates so deeply. I also actually went through a health crisis a few years ago. And my body is still healing in a way, right? From it. Like I actually was diagnosed with breast cancer at age 31. And so I had to go through the whole double mastectomy thing, and I'm still having some spine pain and I'm still having a little bit of tension there. And it's something that I haven't been able to resolve. I've been going to PT, and I obviously eat well. But the more active I am, the more it kind of riffs off. And I was talking to a naturopath friend the other day about this. And we were talking about even when the body heals and the body, it knows it's healed, right? And like the physical stuff has gone away, the nervous system takes so long to catch up to that, right? And sometimes it's like the nervous system's like holding on, like we don't know that it's okay to release this just yet. And I think it's a really interesting thing about like how the body learns to clench up, right?
Mm.
And it's that constant like working with that space of the nervous system. So I think it's just such a fascinating, our bodies are such mysteries, right? And even though like we're experts in this field, and I'm putting that in quotes, because the more I learn, the less I feel like I know. But we're all on this journey, right? And I don't think that it's necessarily like only this way and only the holistic stuff, right? Like I think that there is a lot of wisdom that we can integrate through the Western medicine world too. But it's just really interesting how the body and the nervous system can take a really long time to release and heal too.
And even now, like this is years and years later where like I haven't dealt with it. If I have like a very stressful event and the fight or flight doesn't get turned off, I'll like experience that pain again. And it's
Mm-hmm.
so it is really expansive for me to recognize like how regulated I am on a daily basis, because it's so few and far in between, and how at that time of my life like I lived in this constant state of hypervigilance, and like I kept blaming the body. I'm like, oh, like I'm having a heart attack, something's going wrong, like I'm like, and then it was like they called it something like it was like a pinched nerve in my shoulder blade. And so, I did the PTs, I did the osteopath. And none of it never got better. And then it really just was, like you said, being able to calm the nervous system down, ground myself, connect to my breath, do whatever I need to. And not just in these fleeting moments, but to a point where my day was then regulated and I had short bursts of these like stress responses.
Yeah, and it's a constant practice. Like
Yeah.
it is about showing up every day. It's like, and really connecting with yourself, because it's one of those practices. Like health isn't something that's an on and off switch. It's something that we're constantly working and molding, and healing is an active verb. It's not like a one and done situation. So I love that you said that.
Hi, babes. I am so excited to talk to you about my signature program, the Mindful Method. This is the exact same method that I have been using with hundreds of successful clients to help you heal your relationship to food, to increase confidence, and to lose weight without dieting or killing yourself at the gym. If you're sick of not feeling like your best self, if you're sick of promising yourself that you'll start again on Monday, if you're sick of going on restrictive diets only to gain back the weight, I can tell you right now that if you gained it back, it did not work. You know what's healthy and what's not. You do. You just continue to choose the unhealthy option anyways. And a meal plan will not solve this issue. There is no amount of restriction or discipline or willpower that is going to stop you from self-sabotaging. The body follows the mind. Imagine a life where you don't have to think about what you can or can't eat. Imagine a life where you feel confident in all of your clothes, where every day in every way your body rebalances and you lose all of the weight so you find the truest, healthiest version of yourself. Imagine never having to start again on Monday. This is what happens when you focus on transforming the brain so weight loss is effortless. The body follows the mind, and it's time you actually get to the root cause of your issue. If you are ready to transform and find the truest, healthiest version of you without letting go of your favorite foods, I invite you to fill out the application in my bio. And if you're a good fit, we'll be in touch soon. Back to regular programming.
If you feel comfortable talking about it, can you tell me a little bit more about your breast cancer journey?
Oh gosh, yeah, I am absolutely happy to talk about that. I was diagnosed with stage 1 breast cancer, intraductal carcinoma at age 31 years old. I thought that it had run in it had run in my family because like every woman in my family was diagnosed with breast cancer, but I was the youngest person by like 25 years or something insane. And so when researching and trying to understand why, I think a lot of breast cancer survivors or cancer survivors in general, or anyone who's dealt with any illness, is kind of like a why me is a question that a lot of us ask ourselves. My why, and unfortunately not everyone understands like why they have cancer, but mine was very much interlinked with the environmental exposure of 9/11. So when the Twin Towers fell, they leaked like 10,000 tons of asbestos and dioxins and mercury and PCBs into the air. And that ultimately actually poisoned my mom, and she passed away of lung cancer. And that's why I actually developed breast cancer as well. And so as part of my healing journey was really finding out that I had mercury poisoning and lead poisoning, and doing chelation therapy and doing a full-on detox with that. But I still relied on Western medicine. I went through that double mastectomy and I did my reconstruction, and I am so grateful for all of the tools that were accessible, right? Because I not only had my Western care team and my surgeon and my Western oncologist, but I had a naturopath oncologist. I had my physical therapist. I knew that doing manual lymphatic drainage would be really helpful in my healing process. And so I did that. I went to acupuncture every week. And so I was like, what tools are available for me? I had my breath work practice as well, right? And so I was able to access my tools in a much better way than I think I would have without having that knowledge. And I am so grateful for that as well.
Yeah, and so this kind of brings me to like this a little bit more of like an esoteric conversation, but
Mhm.
I'm like a huge believer in like your pain is your purpose. Like and like
Mhm.
it's not for everybody, like I work with a lot of clients that have had like very severe like sexual domestic abuse, and like I don't necessarily think you need to go and like become an advocate for that if you like don't want it in your life, but if I look back on my life, all the like absolute garbage bullshit things that have happened to me have ended up being like a huge part of who I am. And so, and I like thankfully, I have never been diagnosed with cancer, although my father has. But like when I work with people that have these very like mortal there's a word, like these really intense diagnoses that feel like it's life or death, and it doesn't even
Mhm.
necessarily need to be cancer. Like chronic pain is another one where I work with clients where they're just like, oh, I'm like, I have chronic pain, I have an autoimmune, I like, and it's just this solidifying, like identifying category that they've now placed themselves in. Although we do believe that the body has the ability to heal itself and like, all the things, how do you like, what's your experience, or what would you like to share with my audience, I should say, in, being able to take another point of view when you have these like really intense, like why me moments and it feels like everything is falling apart. How do you like take that and change your mind frame around it?
Yeah, thank you for asking me that. I think it can be really powerful. And I don't think everyone needs to like go out and build a career on their pain, but I agree with you that mine has been, my trauma and my loss and my grief has really been an agent of change and transformation for me. And, way back when, after 9/11, I pretended I was okay, right? Like I just like plastered the smile on and I zipped myself up and I was like, I'm gonna be okay. And part of that transformative process and part of the healing process was really allowing myself to fall apart. And it's so scary, right? And that's why I don't think that we can do that unless we're safe, right? Or like unless we have a perceived sense of safety. But for me, it was about allowing myself to unravel completely. And like the image that would come to me a lot was like a building, right, that had fallen, and just like standing amongst like all of the debris and being like, okay, like my life is literally rubble right now. And it's like
How I feel
it's
right
falling apart. I
now.
don't know if I can curse here, but yeah, no, it's like literally just like it's pieces are on the ground everywhere. It's such a mess,
Yeah.
but like the craziest thing is that I actually get to figure out which pieces I want to pick up and
Mhm.
which pieces that I build with. Right. And I think so many of us have these experiences, right? That are like life altering, like life rocking experiences where our worlds literally come crumbling down. We're like, you know what? I'm going to move forward from this, but I get to do it in a really deliberate way where I get to choose brick by brick which builds my building back and how I want to move forward with my life, And for me, that's been the most powerful shift. And every single time that another source of grief has happened, it's a reminder that I've done it before, I can do it again. And even if you've never been there before, right? Even if you're going into uncharted territory, it's that self-trust that you can do it and that you can heal through it. And that, like, I hate the what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, but it's a saying for a reason, right? Like, it can really fortify you and really empower you into like living a life of deep purpose. And that's at least what I found through my struggles.
Yeah. Oh, that was so beautiful. And I don't know if you're into like astrology or like tarot cards or anything, but I'm like literally having the most tower moment like year. Like I was like when it started happening back in I think it was like March. I was like, all right, like it's going to be a month or two and it's going to be hard, but then it's going to be fine. And then it just like kept going and kept going, and got worse and worse. And maybe I'm coming out of it, but the resistance and truly like every day I have to just like bawl my eyes out and like look at my life and be like, okay, like this is what we're dealing with right now. But it took so like there was so much resistance to get there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that you nailed it where like the fear isn't even like the thing that we're going through. It's like the allowing ourselves to completely unravel and like knowing that like it's gonna be okay if we do. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, that's really, really, really powerful.
Yeah, I think that so many of us like want to cling on because it's like that control, that perceived sense of control, right? Like we never actually have control over our lives. Like it's like, oh, like that's cute that we think that, but we don't actually. And I think that's where like compulsion comes in, right? Because we want, and like for me, that's where anxiety comes from. It's like wanting to control everything and make things absolutely perfect. And when we
Mhm.
can realize that that just doesn't exist at all and just feel safe enough to be like, okay, there's going to become a time where I can like type this in a nice little bow and have a sweet little story, but I don't need to make sense of it now. I just
Mm.
need to just like be in that experience and allow myself um to crumble, really is the only word I have for it. The thing that's coming up for me right now is, do you know that Mary Oliver poem around like she's like the soft animal of your body, like let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Like that
Mm.
always comes to me of just like like we're just animals really in the world, like we're sophisticated animals with higher thought processes, but at the end of the day, we're animals and we need safety, right? And so it's like for me, like that ultimate sense of safety is when we can then unravel and like be icky, sticky, messy versions of ourselves that we don't have to show up perfectly online in any sort of way. And that's real. That's where the juicy stuff is. That's where the healing is.
Yeah. I think actually like so many of our like diseases or disorders actually do just well, I mean, not I think I know, but it is from that perceived sense of being unsafe, right? And it shows up
Mm-hmm.
in so many ways. It's like, with my clients, it's over consumption of food, but mixed with then we have hormone imbalances, and then we have all these things. But like you said, a lot of it is us trying to like grasp control, and trying to like almost like think our way out of things, but really I think the trick here and what you're saying, which I'm like reflecting back is totally accurate, is like it's really just surrendering to it, and it's just like, okay, like this is what's happening. And when you can fully surrender to it and like know that like actually when you surrender and you stop holding on, you're still safe, like that's where the magic happens.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And it's like, those are the times and you're like, okay, there's something happening here. Right. And I'm not going to be the same after, which is also a scary thing. Right. Like
Yeah.
not really knowing where you're going and not really know who you're developing into. But like, I don't
Mm.
know, I think about this all the time. Like when I get to the end of my life, like if I know exactly how the script was going to happen, it would be so boring.
Yeah,
Like
totally.
who wants to watch that movie? Like when you already know the ending, like I think
No.
that it's beautiful to know like that our lives can be messy and that can lead us to some really, really wild places. And for me, like I know that it's led me to a lot of joy being able to sit with that grief, right? And
Mm.
being able to be in that mess.
Yeah, holy crap. Okay. So you have obviously been through your own like really really extensive journey, like you've been through major grief, you had the chronic pain, you had like the overeating patterns, and then the breast cancer stuff as well. And so you obviously have like a very well-rounded view and way to practice with your clients, but is there a particular of client that you like to work with or that you like prefer?
Yeah, I love working with people with digestive issues. I think it is one of the
Mm.
most powerful ways to heal your body is by looking at your digestion. And honestly, even times like when people don't have like outwardly digestive issues in my practice, like they'll have endo or they'll have some autoimmune disease. I always look at the gut and I'm like, like there is something happening here. And even when they don't think they have digestive issues, it's like you still have a microbiome imbalance. Like there's still something that's contributing, right, to your pain. And so, but I think the gut is really the portal for our whole bodies, right? And it's where we digest our nutrients and absorb them so that our cells can do their work and do their thing, right? And so anyone with mood imbalances or hormone imbalances or pain, the first thing that we need to look at is the gut. So that's why I love looking at digestive issues, not only when there are outward digestive symptoms, but digestive issues can be so present when we have other symptoms, because it really is the home for all health and all disease.
Mm. Are you familiar with the enteric nervous system?
Yeah,
Can you
absolutely. The
tell us a
way,
little bit about the enteric nervous system?
oh my gosh. Okay. Yes, of course. So our enteric nervous system is the gut's nervous system, essentially. So it's 500 million neurons in our gut. We have more neurons in our gut than we have in our spine. That is one of my favorite fun facts because it is like kind of mind blowing, to think how much is regulated in our gut. And our gut and our brains are directly connected through the vagus nerve. So the vagus nerve is the longest nerve in our body, and it really goes from the base of your skull all the way through your intestinal tract. And when we're dysregulated, when our minds are not at ease, when we're highly stressed, that impacts our gut health, right? That impacts the way our body's able to digest nutrients. It impacts the health of the microbiome, the trillions of bacteria in our gut that regulate our mood, right? That release serotonin and that create vitamins. I think, GABA is also created in our gut as well. And so when we're stressed, it impacts the blood flow to our gut. It impacts all of those processes. But when we're also not eating well or we're not digesting our food well, that is also going to impact our minds, right? And so this connection really goes both ways, and it is such a powerful connection that they're actually like creating the microbiome, like the 3 trillion bacteria that live in the gut. They're actually starting to consider that its own organ. And so the gut it's just an incredible thing. And so I hope that I answered your question about the vagus nerve, because I
Yeah,
could
yeah,
probably
yeah.
talk about it all day. But
I always describe it because you know how you probably see this all the time where clients are like, "Oh, I have IBS," and I worked with a medical doctor for years in his clinic, and like he was a little bit more holistic in the sense where he had his own health crisis, and you know he recognized that like actually taking high cholesterol, high blood pressure, diabetes medication like wasn't solving any of his problems, and so he at least had a little bit more of a holistic mindset. I mean, at least enough to, no offense, not hire a dietitian, but hire a nutritionist to work with him. Just because in Canada, dietitians are like very regulated by the government.
mm,
But anyways, so we would have clients come or patients come all the time in the clinic, and they would be like, "Oh, I have IBS," and he's like, "Well, what is IBS?" Like, you know, like it's just this term, this like massive umbrella term that I feel when you have gut issues and you also have stress, like doctors are just like, "Oh, it's IBS," and like, well, we'll put you on a PPI maybe, even though
uh,
like that has nothing to do with one another. But I always explain to clients, like I have some clients that, you know, me personally, if I am super stressed, I'm not going to the bathroom at all. Like I gear more
mm,
towards constipation to keep everything in. I at 8 years old, I had to go to the hospital because I didn't shit for like 3 weeks. And it's like it's just this like like I get so but there's also the other side of the spectrum of that where, you know, when people get nervous, then they go to the bathroom so much
mhm.
more, right? And so we know obviously that there is this interconnected like stress and like bowel movement relationship, but it's actually like so much bigger than that. Like if you think about when you get butterflies in your stomach, or like your intuition is like, is this like gut feeling that
Mhm.
nervous system. And it's just it's such a cool, because it's not something that we commonly talk about. I've never talked about it on my podcast before, so it's just a really really cool avenue to go down if you're interested in like any of those digestive and mental health things together.
Oh yeah, I talk about like the trauma gut axis all the time, the brain gut axis all the time, because it is such a powerful connection. And it is really sad to me that patients come to me and they're like, I have IBS, and my doctor, didn't really give me anything else to do about, like, and it seems to be one of those like end diagnoses where they're like, okay, you don't have Crohn's disease, you don't have colitis, like, you don't have any, like, you don't have rectal cancer, like, you don't have anything like outwardly wrong with you. And so we're going to just like slap on this umbrella diagnosis, but there's not really very much guidance. Like maybe at most someone would be given a script for like a low FODMAP diet. Right. And I'd be, so it's
Yeah.
shocking even when doctors do that. And it is, by the way, like one of the most confusing diets to like try to navigate on your
Ever.
own. So please don't do that. And then also you're not supposed to be on it long term anyway, right? And so there's so much like misguidance. And then like the PPIs and all the medications, right, that you're describing, that's not getting at the root cause. And it can actually be so much more damaging for the gut long term to like recommend a PPI that reduces stomach acid, right? But that then, because in order to control your acid reflux symptoms, and I'm putting all of this in quotes, because what that actually does is it compromises digestion more, and it causes like an entire domino effect on the rest of your gut. And so it can over time create actually a lot more harm than it can create good and health and healing. But it can be so frustrating when doctors like don't understand that. They don't even give the proper food guidance, let alone talking about this mind body connection as well.
I have some clients that come to me that have been on PPIs for like years, and I do
Mm-hmm.
do the hypnosis, I do the food psychology, we like work on the meal plan. They're doing everything right. They're not in fight or flight anymore, but like they can't get off the PPI, and that is
Mm-hmm.
definitely the entire barrier to their weight loss journey, because they are no longer digesting any of their food. So it's just like,
Mm-hmm.
how can be an exchange of nutrients when like you're not like the first step, well, the first step I guess is in the brain and the mouth, and then but the stomach plays such an important, that stomach acid plays such an important role in ionizing our minerals and sterilizing and breaking things down so that they can be absorbed. And it's just like it so yeah, anyways, if you're listening to this and you've been on a PPI long term, maybe call it Miriam and or me, or like anybody else who specializes in digestive health, because it's not a long-term solution at all. And it's not, you're
Yeah.
not supposed to be on it long-term, and it creates a lot of harm.
Yeah, it really does. And it's like the PBI thing is a whole conversation because it's like, is it the chicken or the egg, right? Low stomach acid suppresses our ability to absorb the nutrients that we actually need to make stomach acid, right?
Yeah.
So it becomes this like cycle, and it becomes a hard cycle to break, but it is breakable, right? Like we're never stuck. And I just want to kind of communicate that, because I think a lot of people are like, oh my God, I'm doomed, right? And I'm like standing in a corner and I've been on these for 30 years. Like, what do I do? Right? Like we're never stuck. There's always potential for healing, and for our bodies want to heal, they want to regenerate. We just sometimes need to like slow down enough and really listen to what it's saying and what it's communicating. And sometimes it's speaking a different language that we're not really familiar with, and which is why we need translators like you and me, right, to help someone transition to that place.
Yeah. Okay, well, I feel like I could talk to you forever. You're so
You know?
fun. We should grab a coffee sometime. Um, where are you located?
I'm in Los Angeles right now.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
And you work online, or like if
Mhm.
if somebody listens wants to book a call with you, what would that process look like?
Yeah, absolutely. So I work actually exclusively virtually. And then I also, so a few times a year, I lead group breathwork sessions. But if someone's interested in like working with me for nutrition, just reach out to me on my website. There's an application there, and we will chat and, move forward with it. Yeah.
And we'll put all of the links for Miriam in the show notes of this call. But I just wanted to thank you so much for coming on the Mindful Method podcast. Let's connect further. Also would love to have you as a guest speaker in my Mindful Method program. We love breath work. So, and actually, I shouldn't
Mm.
say I hate breath work. Like your resistance to meditation is like my resistance to breath work. So like, I'm like, I know it's good for me. I hate doing it. But maybe you could change my mind. But my clients love it. So let's keep the conversation going. But is there anything else that you'd like to share with my audience before I let you go?
I think the last thing is that we talked a lot about like trauma and like digging into the deepest corners of our vessels, and we talked a lot about that today. And I think, based on our conversation and just like levity, I just wanted to also communicate that like healing also is fun, right? And it can be joyful. And it's not just like I think it's just as like uncomfortable, sometimes to like go to the discomfort and go to the uncomfortable places, but it also expands our capacity for joy and through connection, right? And so like I think that healing can also be incredibly joyful, and I do want to communicate that, so it's not like a dreaded process.
I really appreciate that, especially because I was just like, oh, you just gotta submit to it and just bawl your eyes out every day. It's not, that is not necessary. And actually, if you don't resist it, you'll feel the joy a lot quicker. So
Well, and it's all of it, it's like we can hold ourselves as complicated, layered human beings.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, Miriam. Well, this was lovely. Thank you so much for coming on the Mindful Method podcast. If you like this episode, don't forget to like and subscribe and share it with somebody who might need it. And I'll see you back on another episode of the Mindful Method podcast. Bye.